Good afternoon, everyone. If you have just joined us, I'm Michael. I'm going to be hosting the session today. So we're looking at the accounts audit option in Sage 50 Accounts. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started with the webinar itself. So if you're joining us for the first time, or maybe you haven't attended a webinar for a little while, just to let you know what's going to be happening. So you don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one and you enable it, you'll just find it's muted automatically. You can't unmute yourself. So if you've got any questions for us, all you need to do is type them into the questions panel. Now, to access the questions panel, you just need to click the little icon on the toolbar, the one that looks like the speech bubble containing the question mark. It'll expand the panel. You get a little box in the bottom right-hand corner, and then you'll be able to start typing any comments or questions that you have. So just pop it in there, click send, and it should pop up on our screens, and we'll try our best to pick those up. So we're joined by Jackie today, who'll be on hand to help answer those questions. But we're just about ready to get started, so I'll pop on to the next slide and we'll get going. So today we're looking at Sage 50 Accounts. We're looking at specifically the accounts audit option. So this is a quick learn session, so we'll be looking at maybe somewhere in the region 10 to 15 minutes of demonstration followed by questions. But do keep your questions coming. We'll try and pick those up along the way. A little bit of background we're going to start with. So a little bit of an introduction to the accounts audit option. We'll then just run through a series of demonstrations outlining those options, how they work, etc. And then we'll pick up on additional support and open up to any questions if anyone has any at that point. So maybe run a few extra demos if needed. Now, the accounts audit option, simple option, it's something that's been around for a long time within the software. It helps you to quickly and easily identify potential processing issues in your software, so things to watch out for. If anyone is familiar with the VAT return, I'm sure many of you are, you'll probably be familiar with the accounts verification checks that's applicable when you're running through that VAT return wizard. So this is very similar, but it means you can easily access this at any time. And the checks are very similar as well. But again, it's just to try and identify those potential processing issues. It doesn't necessarily mean there's an issue that you have to resolve. It just means potentially something to maybe look into. Now, you'll be able to select which of those checks you want to apply. And as I mentioned, it's very similar to when you're running through that the VAT return wizard itself, so you can pick and choose which ones are applicable to yourself. You'll also be able to apply a date filter as well. So if you're looking just to maybe apply those accounts audit checks for a specific period, you can do that. And the option that we're looking at today, it is available in all variants of Sage 50 Accounts. So it doesn't matter whether you're on the essentials level, standard or professional, it is available to you. If you don't have the option that we're looking at today, then that will be down either to your access levels, so what to do with your logon name, or it'll be potentially that you've hidden that option by right-clicking on your toolbar and you've switched that option off, which would be probably quite unusual for the accounts audit, because it's a one not many people actually use. You never know, if you watch the webinar and you think, actually, I'm still not going to use it, it might be a one that you hide on the back of that. So easy enough to do. Now, there's lots of information, as you would expect, within our help center, which is why we don't provide handouts for these quick learns. So if you want the information, the detailed information, you will find that in our help center. Just search for accounts audit. It should find it, or go into the accounts audit option if you're on version 29, and you can click the little help link in the top right corner, and that will bring up the relevant help for that area. Right, okay, so let's get stuck into the demonstration, just so you can see what we're actually talking about. I'll share my screen, we'll get started. So we're going to pop into transactions. So transactions on the left here. And it's this option here that we're going to look at today. So the accounts audit option. Now, as I mentioned, if you haven't got that, and it is available in all levels, the only reason maybe why you wouldn't have that is you've right-clicked somewhere on your toolbar. And as you can see, accounts audit is an option. So is it a case you've taken the tick off against that option, so it's no longer listed? If you right-click, and it's there, if you can switch it back on, you should then have the icon at the top. If If it's not listed at all, then that will be down to your access level. So if you need access to this option, then whoever logs in as manager, if necessary, would be able to enable that against your username. Right, let's pop into it and you'll see the checks, and again, very similar to the VAT verification options. So we got 7 of these checks. It will be dependent on what level of software you use. So you'll have this one at the bottom relating to purchase orders if you're on the professional level of the software. If you're on Essentials or Standard, you won't have that option available to you, but we'll come on to them in a moment. So we got 7 checks maximum. First one is to identify possible duplicate transactions. So just a case of you ticking the boxes, the ones that you want to apply. But what I'll do is I'll quickly sort of run through and explain each of them in turn. Some of them may be applicable to you, others you might think, well, actually that doesn't apply to me. And because of, or since Brexit, if you're UK based, probably these ones here referring to EC sales transactions and EC purchase transactions, they'd probably no longer be applicable to you at this stage. But we'll run through them just so you can see what each of them refer to. So the first one there is identify possible duplicate transactions. So if I just tick the box, I'll OK that. Again, you can apply a date range. You might just want to check your accounts as a whole just to make sure there's no potential queries. And we can OK that. Now, what it finds in my list is, well, quite a list there. So it's listing the transaction number. If it comes from an invoice or an order number, if it has one, it'll list that. In this case, it's saying potential or the transaction type. So I'm sure you're familiar with those. So I've got some bank payments here at the bottom, for instance, BPs. The reference that you've entered against the transaction, you've got the net value, the tax code that's being used, and it will also give you the comment. Now, the transactions might not necessarily be consecutive on the list. You may have entered that transaction and the idea is maybe you've saved where you're up to, you got interrupted, and then you come back and you pick up where you think you left off. And before you know it, you've duplicated some transactions. So that's what this option is trying to achieve. So we're trying to identify where maybe you've got duplicate transactions. It might be legitimately that you've keyed it in with the same information. But again, nice, easy one. So to find possible duplicate transactions, it's going to identify it based on transaction type, the details. Now, one thing relating to the details of a transaction is the check itself is case sensitive. So not only do those details against the transaction have to be typed the same, they've got to be identical basically for it to identify that as a duplicate transaction. So transaction type, details, the account or nominal code, they need to be the same. The date of the transaction needs to be the same reference, same net, same tax. So it's got that information. It will identify it on this list, assuming you've ticked the box and it falls into that specific date range. Now, as far as duplicates are concerned, you've also got another option within your software as well. If I just close out of this, and I'm going to branch off a little bit from this option just at this stage. So to try and prevent you duplicating the transactions in the first place, so that you're not entering it, then trying to identify them, you do have some options which can help when entering customer and supplier transactions. And you'll find that one within settings, company preferences. Just prompts you to re-enter your password. And on the parameters tab, you've got this option here, check for duplicates in customer batch entries. And you've got a similar option on the right, check for duplicates in supplier batch entries. So the idea is with these options switched on, if you go into key in, let's say a batch invoice as an example, we choose the customer. I'll just use today's date and I'll pop in a reference, let's say 123. Just put test in the details and we'll say it was £100. Now, if I keep entering on this screen, So I'll just press F6 a few times to copy whatever's in the box above. And you'll see it highlights it in like an amber color at that point. You get the warning triangle as well, and tell you this line is a potential duplicate. But you'll also get that when entering it if you've entered it previously. So again, if we just, let's discard this line, we'll remove that row. I'll just save this one. And if let's say I've come back and I'm starting to pick up where I left off, and I think, right, well, I need to enter that one. Pop in the same reference, type in test. And this time, as I tab past that net field, because all the details are the same, it recognizes that. And this box will appear at the bottom, potential duplicate transactions which have already been posted. So it will give me a list of them that match. So it's a similar option. So rather than you go through the accounts audit option, so within transactions and coming into here to say, right, I want to identify possible duplicate transactions at this point, you can switch those options on so that potentially it will identify it at the point of entry. So prevention better than cure. But that's what this first option will do, it would identify those possible duplicate transactions. The next check is to identify invoices or credits, because it works for that as well. It should probably mention that in the text, but it doesn't. So it will identify invoices or credits that have been entered within the invoices and credits module that have not been updated and or printed within 14 days of your current program date. So is it a case you've entered and you forgot to post it into your accounts, or you haven't actually sent it to the customer, you forgot to do that? So when it says printed as well, that would include, has it been emailed? So again, if I just run that, again, you'll see I'm given the same sort of date range option. So I'll just OK that, and it will give me a list of them. Now in this case, it's telling me here, say 501 and 502, just telling me that invoice has not been updated and or printed within 14 days. So it's going to look at your current program date. It'll count back 14 days, and then any invoice or credit for that matter, that's on your list that hasn't been updated to the ledgers, so it hasn't been posted and hasn't been printed or emailed, it will pick that up. So just to confirm, if we go into invoices and credits, and you can see these two at the bottom that were identified. So this one here, invoice 501, obviously based on the date, it's more than 14 days old compared to the current program date. This one has been printed, but it hasn't been posted. Whereas the one below, it's flagged as posted, so I've updated that to the ledgers so it would appear on the customer's account, but I haven't printed it or emailed it. So I might have updated it to my account, but actually it's not indicating that I've sent a copy to my actual customer. Now for this first one, if I just 501, if I'll just update it to the ledgers. Just OK that. Oh, getting an error on what must be my report in the background there. Anyway, that's now been posted. So if we go back to transactions and back into accounts audit, select that option, just OK it, and this time 501 is no longer on the list. Now the 14 days is fixed, you can't amend that. If you wanted it to be a shorter period, so let's say you wanted it based on around 7 days, because it uses the program date, what you could do is always change your program date, advance that 7 days, and then it would mean any invoices which have not been printed or updated in the last 7 days, anything older than that would then be identified. So it's a little bit of a trick there if you need it. Right, let's have a look at the next one on the list. Now it's a bit of a strange one, this one. I've always thought it's a bit of a strange one, this third one. So it's to identify sales and purchase payments on account not using the non-vatable tax code. Now, if you're on the standard VAT scheme and you enter a payment on account, it will automatically pick up your non-vatable tax code. So by default, T9. If you're on the cash accounting scheme, then it will actually use the tax code will actually be picked up from your customer or supplier defaults, and that's quite normal on that. If you're on cash accounting, that it will identify these transactions. So if you are on cash accounting, you probably mentioned that you probably wouldn't switch this one on. Now, for those of you on the standard VAT scheme, the only way that this one is going to actually pick up and highlight a potential issue for you is if you've entered a payment on account and you've subsequently gone in to either one, edit the payment on account and amend the tax code. So you've changed it. However, you would get a warning surrounding that one. Or once you've posted that payment on account, you've gone in then to amend your non-vatable tax code for the company as a whole, which is very unusual. So the chances are you're not going to see anything identified by this one, but just on the off chance you are in that rare position where you've done that, it would identify that for you. Now, the fourth check is to identify sales and purchase transactions not using your standard rated tax code. Now, this is similar to the one within the VAT verification settings within the VAT return itself. However, the one within the VAT return is not just looking at sales and purchase transactions, it's going to look at transactions as a whole. So it would also pick up things like bank payments and receipts. Whereas this one is looking specifically at sales invoices and credits, purchase invoices and credits that do not use this tax code here. Now, let's just take from a sales side. If you sell goods or provide services which you might use a range of tax codes, then it is going to identify them. You can choose your most commonly used tax code, but if anything differs from that, it will identify it as a potential query. So potentially this could throw out loads of queries for you. So that's all that's referring to. But again, if maybe you would expect all of your sales or all of your purchase to use a specific tax code, which you can choose from that list if required, then it will identify it when you run that check. So I'll just give you a quick example there as well. If we switch that one on, and we can see on this list, I've got loads of these transactions, and this is probably one of them where you would maybe want to narrow it down by date range. So it's telling me all of these transactions that are listed aren't using my most commonly used tax code. So I've got some T9 transactions, some T0 transactions. It might go all the way back to when you've entered opening balances. I've got any others. So basically, I've got some T7s, T8s. So any transaction that you've entered, a sales or purchase transaction, that isn't using that tax code that you've specified on this list. Right, now the next two, I mentioned this one at the beginning. This is to identify EC sales transactions or EC purchase transactions where you've posted or you've used an EC sales or EC purchase tax code, what was an EC tax code. So you've got that tax code flagged as being an EC sale or relating to an EC purchase. So where you've entered a transaction, you've used the appropriate tax code, and within the customer or supplier record, you do not have a VAT registration number stored. Now, that's not really going to be applicable these days for you if you're UK based, but it's something that you should still, it might be good practice if we ever join the EC again. So if we're in the rejoin, not sure what we'd call it other than unbrexit or something along those lines. So possibly good practice just to make sure you've got that information recorded in your customers or supplier records. So again, let's take an example. I'll just switch this one on as an example. Customer accounts, we'll just run it. And it's telling me that this sales invoice, in this case, it's transaction 1419. Now, interestingly, what it doesn't tell us at this stage is which customer it is. So you are going to need to track that down. So if I just do 1419, close out, find that on the list. So I've got a 1419, it's SI, it's to my customer account code France. So I just go into that customer, find it on the list, and it's referring to your VAT number field. So let's put a French one in. Should accept that one. And by having that VAT registration number in there recorded against that account where we posted a transaction that uses an EC tax code, it would now mean that we should no longer get that audit issue. So we'll just apply that again. Okay, that one, and it doesn't find it this time. Okay, final check to quickly mention, and this one would be for those of you that are using the professional level of the software. So if you're using Essentials or Standard, you don't have the purchase orders module. And this final check is basically to identify any purchase orders which have been delivered but not invoiced. Now, as far as the purchase orders module is concerned, you probably find it's a bit of a 50-50 split as to whether you use the update ledgers option or not. And what do I mean by that? Well, if we go into a purchase order option, the purchase orders ledger, and we've got this one here. So let's say we've received the deliveries of this one that's on order. Let's print that later. So it's now complete. And once you're in that position, when you are invoiced by your customer, you tend to find this is where the 50-50 split occurs. So because you've entered the information as a purchase order, you've got the option to update your ledgers. So essentially feed that information through as a batch invoice. So it'll pop the information into the batch invoice screen. Now, 50% of users will use this option, and the other 50 will actually just not bother with the update ledgers option, and what they'll do is literally go into suppliers and enter that as a batch invoice. Now, if you are using that option where you're going in and just entering it as a batch invoice, then all of your purchase orders are going to basically throw out a potential query for you. So if we just go back to transactions, select that last one, just OK that, and you'll see I've got a list of them here. But if we pick on number 48, we'll go quickly back into purchase orders, select 48, and I'll run the update ledgers option. I'll just say, yeah, I've been invoiced for all of that now. Update it to the ledgers, so a bit like invoices when you update those to the ledgers, so you're posting that information across. It fills in the batch invoice screen for me, and I'm just ready to save it at that point. You can see in the posted column, we've got full. So number 48 should no longer appear in the accounts audit check now when I select that option. So let's just prove that one. Select that option, click OK, and number 48 is no longer listed. So that brings us to the end of the accounts audit quick learn this afternoon. If you've got any questions, if you want to pop them into the questions panel, been quite quiet on the questions panel so far, but if you've got any questions and you want to hang around just to make sure you get an answer to that, please pop them in the questions panel now. We'll try our best to quickly pick those up. Again, just as a reminder, to access that panel, you just need to click your little icon on your toolbar, the one that looks like the speech bubble containing the question mark. It'll expand the panel. You've got that box in the bottom right-hand corner. Just as a quick reminder as well, some of the upcoming sessions that we've got planned in, just in case you are interested in signing up for any of our other sessions. Some will be quick learns, so similar style to the one we've been running this afternoon with you, and others will be more of a traditional webinar where you would get handouts, probably a bit more lengthy as well, going into an option in a bit more detail. So we've got business dashboard, we've got the VAT return where we're going to be looking at it from a flat rate scheme perspective if you're in the UK. We've got a session on recurring items, departments, budgets, bank reconciliation, and this week we've got a brand new session which will be looking at the disputes option within the software. Webinars are available to book onto up until the end of August, so loads of sessions. If you are interested, do get yourself signed up. All free to attend. The links will be included so that you can register for those webinars on your follow-up email. So you should receive that follow-up email in round about an hour's time. It will also include a link so that you can watch recordings as well. So if there's any sessions you've missed and you want a bit of a recap, you can watch them at your own pace. So all of the sessions we run, we do record them. We make those available afterwards. So again, last call for any questions. If you want to quickly pop them in. If you think of anything afterwards, do check out the information in the Help Centre. Remember, our support team is on hand as well. Just as a quick request, there'll be a little survey pop up as you leave the session today. If you can take a minute to add in any thoughts, comments, suggestions that you have for us, that would be great. We love reading those comments just to see if we're hitting the mark or not. So it should take you about a minute maximum to complete that. And as mentioned, your follow-up email will be with you in round about an hour's time. Right, we still don't have any additional questions, so I think we'll just end the webinar at that point. So many thanks for coming along. Hope you've enjoyed it, found it useful, giving you a bit of an insight into maybe just that extra option within the software. You never know, it hopefully might help you identify some potential queries, so give it a go. It's just identifying, it's not making any changes at this stage, so it'll just hopefully identify those options for you and obviously give you an opportunity to correct it if necessary. So many thanks, take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you again on some other webinars soon. Many thanks.